Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some nectarine fritters with a mild cinnamon glaze, bacon, fried tomatoes, and some scrambled eggs. So let's start getting our bacon cooking because that always takes a hot minute to fry up. And then we are going to work on our fritters. So we've got a pound of looks like hickory smoked bacon. Pull this out. I'll break it apart in just a second. Let me throw this away. And I always do my bacon in a pan because we kind of like our crazy pan fry here. Gets it nice and crispy and delicious. So get it all. And looks like this. Some bacon recently I've been buying, the original cut is more like a thick cut, but this today looks like a good normal cut. So let me wash my hands and then we're going to get this going. Okay. So I'm going to start with my bacon on, I'll start it on a little bit higher to heat the pan up, and then I'm going to turn it down to a medium so we don't burn it before we've got a good fry through. Let's start on I'm going to prep our nectarines for our fritters. So I've got 3 ripe nectarines here. You could use peaches as well, but I don't like the fuzz on peaches, so nectarines are for the win. So we're just going to kind of get as much of this good meaty stuff from around that pit. Here we go. And also with nectarines, you really don't have to peel off that skin if you don't want to, because it's such a tender skin that it's not like an apple skin. So you won't notice it so much when it's cooking up. Now I'm going to give just a mild, I might not, actually, I think I'm just going to chop mine up. No, there we go. And then you're going to want to cut them up in, nice small pieces so that they'll get spread throughout in our delicious fritter. And then we'll be using cinnamon to kind of enhance these flavors as well. So similar to how you would do kind of an apple fritter. Here. So just get these all diced up. And I feel like this is just a great time because I feel like everybody is having peaches, nectarines, because they're all in season. So nice and small. You don't want them too big because, again, you want them to kind of spread throughout our batter. Here we go. And here. Now, if you are going to use a peach for this, you definitely want to peel off that skin. That one's a little mushy. That will just kind of fall apart. Because that peach skin is not going to get as tender and it will have that fudge. So it'll have a slightly different texture, which the nectarines, that's just a delicate skin that you can kind of get away with. And last few. And then we'll set these to the side and we're going to make our fritter batter. And then we'll start kind of heating up our oil to kind of get ready to cook these in. And then we are going to make a delicious glaze. Okay. Just making sure I don't have any super huge. So I'll just do a couple more chops over. But look at all that's going to be going into our batter here. And then I'm just going to turn my bacon pan down just a little bit and give it a toss. Now that it's nice and hot. I'm going to turn it down to about a 6. So still a medium high. Yes. Okay, let's start. Let's get this kind of show on the road. We're going to start with our wet ingredients. We're going to use a 1/2 cup of milk. And I'm using whole milk here. 1 egg. And then we're going to use a 1/2 cup of sour cream. And this, you could also use plain yogurt. This is going to give it really soft, like moist inside that will be delicious. And so we want a half a cup here. And I'm just going to eyeball my half a cup. Okay, that should be just about it. And then 2 tablespoons of melted butter. Get all that out. And now I'm going to mix these until I've got kind of a smooth liquid batter here. Sometimes that sour cream can get a little chunky. So just kind of mix it in smooth. And then we're going to add in our baking powder, our salt, and our cinnamon, and then our sugar and our flour. So pretty simple here, not too difficult to make. Again, we're going to fold, get this all mixed in. Try to again whip up those things. I like to use a pat, like a spatula or spoon, versus using a hand mixer here, because when we get to add the flour, we don't want to over mix our batter because we want it to be nice and light and fluffy, and a little bit of a chunk to it. There we go. Okay, now we are going to add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So that egg and the baking powder are going to help make these nice and fluffy on the inside. So we've got 1 and 2. Then we're going to do a half a teaspoon of salt. And then a big heaping teaspoon of cinnamon. So we're going to do cinnamon in our batter, and then I'm going to do cinnamon in our glaze to really make it pop a little bit more. So we want a big kind of heaping spoonful. There we go. To really bring out those spices on the nectarines. Before I mix this in, I'm going to start warming up our oil for our fritters. So we need a good amount in here. They don't need to be completely submerged when we're frying them, but we want them to, kind of be about halfway aroundish so they get a nice kind of golden fry on it. I'm using a big pan, so I've got a lot of oil in here, but it's a lot less than if you were using a deep fryer. And I'm going to start with heating my oil up on high. And then once we get ready to throw our fritters in, I'm going to turn it down to about a medium so they get a nice golden brown fry on it. Turn our bacon here. There we go. And now let's start mixing in our spices, our baking powder and our cinnamon. That baking powder should start to make your batter nice and fluffy because it's going to react with that sour cream in there. There we go. I just want to make sure I mix it all the way up so I don't have any clumps of baking powder. But this way you don't have to do the extra process of sifting it through the flour, which I am not a fan of. Here we go. And then we're going to add in a half a cup of sugar. Now you can always do less or more depending on how sweet you like your fritters, but I find that a half a cup gives you that kind of perfect amount of sweetness because you're going to have that glaze on top, which will add a bit more. So we've got our half a cup of sugar. Slide this right over here. I'm going to mix that up, and then we're going to add in our flour once this is mixed in. But again, I'm waiting towards the very end to add my flour in because I want to keep my batter kind of lumpy and fluffy, and if I over mix the flour part, that's when you get a stiffer fritter. There we go. A little bit of sour cream there. Let's mix that in. There we go. Okay, now we're going to add in 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. So I've got 1 and a half cups.
You have a question about your pans. Do you think Hexclad is worth the price?
I do. I really do think Hexclad is worth the price. I've had these for about 2 years now. I haven't scratched them. They're really easy to clean. And they provide a really good even cooking on it. So I actually have 4 pans. I have the 12-inch, the 10-inch, the 8-inch, and the griddle pan. I've actually put them all in my Amazon storefront because I like them so much. I've gone through a lot of nonstick pans, and most of the time I damage them by scratching them. These 2 years going, not a single scratch, and they look just as good as if I bought them, the day I bought them. So I really do recommend them. I think they're really good pans. Okay, I'm going to stir my batter until it's just combined. Again, it's going to be nice and thick because I don't want to make it creamy. I want it to be lumpy. So just like this. And then we're going to fold in our nectarines into this, and they'll be ready to, once our oil's hot, we'll be ready to drop these in. So I'm going to pick these up. And you see, we're going to just have so much deliciousness. Okay. I'll slide these right over here and give my hands a little bit of a wash. And then I'm going to fold. And so that by folding, if you're not sure what that is, you're essentially scooping up from the bottom and taking that batter and literally like folding it on top. So it's just a way to incorporate ingredients without stirring. So it kind of just allows it to mix in gently. There we go. Okay. This is looking good. Okay. I'm going to check my oil here, see if it's nice and hot. I do have a good amount in there, so it might take a little bit longer to heat up. Now, I check it by putting a teeny tiny drop of water in. And if it sizzles right away, didn't put enough water on my finger, then I know it's ready. Not quite yet. I want it to sizzle instantly when I get there. Let's get our bacon flipped. I'm going to turn my bacon now down to a 4 because, again, I want it to nice and slow fry. Now, sometimes when you get bacon, you notice I don't have a lot of grease here coming out of my bacon. I found recently the bacon is not as fatty as it used to be, which means it doesn't fry up quite as nice. And I know this might sound crazy, but if you add in just like a tablespoon of butter, it's going to give you enough of that oil to give you that perfect crispy bacon. And it really is. It's just, I never had this problem until the last couple of years, but I've noticed now bacon just doesn't have as much oil or fat in it as it used to. And therefore, it doesn't get like sweat out enough fat to give you that really crispy pan fry that it used to do. Okay. I'm going to rotate this handle. We'll start making our glaze here. And then that oil should be nice and hot. So for our glaze, we're going to be using milk, cinnamon, vanilla extract, and powdered sugar. Let's see. I'm going to check my oil now because I see a little bubble happening. Pretty good. Yep, that looks good. We got a good boil right away. So I'm going to turn it down to about a 6, and we'll add a little bit down lower and lower. And then we're going to just drop in a little bit at a time. And you don't want to overcrowd your fritters. So don't fill up your pan with a whole bunch at a time, because that's going to turn down the oil, and it's going to make it hard for it to kind of cook as evenly as possible. So I'll probably do 3 right now. There we go. And then we're just going to simply kind of fry them until I start to see these golden edges come up, and then we'll flip them. Got it again on about a 5. Now let's make our glaze, because it's going to be really important for us to, when they come out, we're going to glaze them so that glaze can just run over them. So I'm going to start. I've got about a tablespoon and a half of milk in here, and I'm using whole milk. We're going to add in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So that will give just a really nice flavor to it. And then we're going to add in, I'm going to do, because my teaspoon thing is wet, I'm going to do a teaspoon of cinnamon, but I'm just going to do 2 halves of a teaspoon to get there, because I just used for my vanilla, so it's wet. So, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Now, if you want less cinnamon flavor, of course, you could skip the cinnamon and just do a sweet glaze, but I find the cinnamon gives you just that extra pop that you need. Just going to give that a quick little mix. And then we're going to start making sure I've got my powdered sugar here. I'm going to start with a 1/2 cup, but I'm going to add some more until we get to the right kind of consistency to dip our fritters in. There we go. So if you use cream in your glaze, it's going to use a little less powdered sugar. But I'm aiming at probably going to be using about a cup and or half of powdered sugar for this. So we're just going to whisk it around. We want to make sure we get all these kind of clumps out of it. But I always start by adding in just about a 1/2 cup at a time. And I will say powdered sugar dissolves really easily with liquid. So always start with a little amount of liquid. And if you need more glaze, you can add a bit more, but less is more. There we go. These are starting to get nice golden edges around it. You can kind of see just a little bit. We're getting this little golden edge forming. And then we'll be ready to flip these and fry them up on the other side. Now, if you were doing these in like a fryer, you wouldn't have to flip them halfway through. There we go. I think a little over a cup was good for this, because I want it to be nice and runny, because I don't want this to be frosting on the fritters, but a nice kind of thin glaze. There we go. Let me get a spatula here, and I'm going to use a tong to kind of help me as well. There we go. You know what? I'm actually going to switch to my fish spatula, because I think that will work a little bit easier. You want something thin that will slide right under. There we go. It'll make it a little bit easier to flip. I think this one needs a little bit more time. But you see how that nice golden brown? We don't want to cook it on too high of a temp, because I have it right now on a 5. If you took it too high, you're going to get a burnt fritter instead of a golden brown fritter. And I will say, smaller fritters are easier to work with than big fritters. So if you're new and you're starting out in the beginning, make smaller ones, because they're much easier to handle and flip. And I'd rather be more successful than be discouraged by the process. There we go. So we've got our first round of our fritters flipped. And now that our oil is nice and hot, our next sets of fritters are going to go much, much faster. We'll click here. Let me check on our bacon. There we go. Now we're starting to get this good kind of fry up on our bacon. I'm going to turn it down to about a 4 now. You see, I constantly am turning my bacon down because you don't want it to be so hot that you burn your bacon in the pan, but you want this nice kind of crispy fry on it. There we go. And do you see how nice and puffy our fritters are? They are just looking fantastic. I think our first one here is ready to come out. Now, when you take these out, you want to use a slotted spatula. So originally I was going with my thermofold spatula, but it's a little bit thicker at the base. So I'm using my fish spatula because it works a little better. But it's nice and thin, but that slot, you want those so that extra grease falls out. If you use a regular spatula, it's going to, you'll bring that grease with you. Okay. And I put these right here for just a second. We'll let them kind of cool off just a little bit so that they're easier to handle. And then we will glaze them. I think this big one needs a little bit longer, but I'm going to put my next round of batter in. There we go. And again, smaller fritters will cook a little bit faster than big fritters. And they're easier to maneuver. Let's get our next batch here.
No question. Did you use tempura?
I did not use tempura. This is made with flour, egg, milk, a little bit of melted butter, sugar, and cinnamon. We will upload this video to the link on our page, so if you want to recreate these at home, you'll be able to. There we go. So I got those next sets going in while this big one kind of fries up. And I'm cooking mine. I have my oil right now on about a medium. Here we go. This should be good. I'll give it a little shake. Let that oil kind of fall off. And I'm putting this on a cookie drying rack. This allows the extra grease to fall down, but then when we glaze it, it will allow that extra grease to kind of fall down, or extra glaze to fall down as well. Here we go. So we've got our next sets going in here. And now let's take this guy, nice golden brown all the way around. And then we're just going to dip. Give him a little shake off. And I'll put it right here. And then he'll drip down underneath. Beautiful. And I always just run it off in here a little, but you want to do it while they're still hot so that glaze kind of runs off, because you don't want it super thick on there. You want it a little bit lighter. There we go. But delicious. So we've got our first 3 done. I'll wash my hands because they're kind of glazy now. And soon our bacon is getting near done. There we go. Once I start to see a lot of this white foam come up in there, that's kind of the bacon juices like popping out of the oil. I'll know that they're pretty crispy when we get there. And then I'm gonna start prepping my tomatoes, because we're just gonna do a simple fried tomato, which will be delicious. Let me just grab a small cutting board for this. And I put my knife right here. I'm going to rinse it off from those peaches or nectarines. And for these, I'm actually just going to cut them in half. So these are Campari tomatoes, which are they're nice and sweet, and they have a nice, wonderful flavor. So we're just going to I'll put them in that bacon grease and we'll fry them. And then I'll sprinkle them with a little bit of fresh parsley, which will just make them delicious. I feel like fried tomatoes, I feel like they're an overlooked breakfast food, but they are so delicious. Okay, these are looking like they are ready to flip. I'm seeing some nice golden edges. There we go. Flip this over. Okay, and this was the last one I added in, so I'm going to let it have a little bit more time. And again, with the fritters, you know, this isn't like a meat that you have to worry about cooking all the way through, but you want to cook them slower on like a medium heat versus on a high heat, because you want to make sure that batter in the middle gets all the way cooked through in there. And I don't make them big and thick. I kind of spread them out more like a pancake, because again, that allows it to cook a little bit more evenly. And in here, the thing that gives them that real pop is that baking powder. So that 1 egg and those 2 teaspoons of baking powder really allow it to just pop, puff up. Gives that nice kind of leavening to it. Okay, our bacon is just about there. We have a cup. I'm going to pull out a couple of mine that are definitely ready. I said, got to get my paper towels this weekend. Luckily, I have a crazy amount of random decorative napkins. You know, it's one of those things where I feel like growing up, we never had paper towels. Like there was always like 1 roll in your house. And now I feel like I can't live without paper towels. And I've been out of paper towels for like 2 days now. And I have like my big, subscribe and save coming from Amazon. And I'm like, it's coming. I'm not going to buy some. It's coming. And I'm like, I don't know why I didn't buy some. Should have just went and bought some. Here we go. Now I'm putting my bacon out on napkins or paper towels to kind of suck up that extra grease. It's going to leave them nice and crunchy. If you don't put them on a paper towel, you'll have more of a chewy bacon versus a crunchy, crispy bacon. There we go. Just a few more in here that need just a smidge longer. Let's say this fritter right here. Just let me check it. Peek under almost. It needs a little bit more time before I flip it. But now you can see these over here, this glaze that we put on has practically like dried now, so it's not going to be as wet and gooey. That's why you want to do it on hot, because it glazes it over, but then it's easy to manage where it's not super sticky. Okay. This bacon is ready to come off. So I'm going to put it all out, let it absorb up that extra thing. And now I'm not going to take out any of my extra grease yet. I'm going to fry my tomatoes in here. And so I'm just going to actually lay them my half part down, and then we'll flip them and cook them on the other side. But this will just heat them up and have nice savory kind of fried tomatoes, which will go great with our scrambled eggs and bacon. Okay, looks like this guy is. Yeah. This one's ready. And give them a good shake. We've got our next fritter coming off. Let's see how this one is. That one needs just a smidge more, but we'll put in our next batter to cook. But let them, if you don't try to dip them right away, because they're going to be really, really hot. So just let them cool off for just a minute or two before you start to dip them in the glaze, so you don't burn yourself. There we go. Get a little bit, another little chunk in there. But again, instead of just dumping them thick, kind of spread them out a little bit. It allows them to cook up a little bit faster instead of being a big thick mound. And now let's dip these guys because it doesn't take long for them to cool down, just enough. There we go. And delicious. So we've got our next round of fritters dipped and ready to eat. And let's look at this, guys. I always just peek. This guy is just about ready. We'll take him off. He needs a little bit more time. I'll add in a little fritter right here. Then we're going to flip our tomatoes and get them cooked on the other side. We're getting down to the end of our fritter batter soon. But this batch makes a good amount of fritters. So it is, you're a smaller family, you could definitely have it because that's all, we've made a good amount. Let me grab a nice thin spatula here. I might be able to do it with just my things. There we go. We're just going to flip. I don't even need this. I'll use that for the eggs in just a second. We're just going to flip these over and do a nice little cook on the other side. We want to keep them nice and firm. You don't want to cook them until they've turned to, mush. But they'll have this just nice flavor in it. And we'll sprinkle these with a little bit of garlic salt and some fresh parsley here. And that adds in just a little bit of flavor. So just a little over those top. There. And then I'm going to mince up my fresh parsley. You don't need very much, just about enough to make about a teaspoon. And then when we take these off of our frying pan, I'll sprinkle them with the fresh parsley. Okay, this, guys, I'm pretty sure is ready to come out. Yep, it's nice and golden. Got to make room. We'll put that there. And I think this guy is ready to flip. And move him over. And I think this guy is ready as well. Just about. I'm actually going to rotate them and let them sit for 1 second.
Was that parsley that you chopped up, and was it regular or Italian?
That was Italian parsley, so it was the flat leaf parsley, and just enough to make about a teaspoon of minced parsley. It adds just a little extra boost of fresh, but you could also do fresh basil, chives. If you love cilantro, you could do a cilantro on them. There we go. I'm going to grab a little plate for my tomatoes now. And then we'll glaze our last two. There we go. But I just love a good fried tomato with eggs. It's just so good. And it's perfect to use if your garden is blooming full of tomatoes right now. Mine is not. I have lots of green tomatoes. There's the promise of red tomatoes in the future. Okay. I'm going to turn off my bacon grease here for just a second. I'm going to sprinkle my fresh parsley over the tops of these. There we go. And now let's get this guy flipped. There we go. Is this guy ready? Almost. Okay. I'm going to rinse the parsley off my hands. We don't want any parsley on our nectarine fritters. And let's dip these two guys. There we go. We're getting low on my glaze. Might have to make a little bit more glaze for these last ones. There we go. So we've got those. And now we can start getting our eggs ready here. So this is going to be way too much grease to fry your eggs in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out some of it because it will make you really greasy eggs that will get slimy instead of cook up. And I want to take out some of those burnt bits. So just using a napkin or paper towels, you're just going to pour a little bit out. You want to reserve some because you do want some of that nice flavor. And then I'm just going to scrape with my kind of a napkin or a paper towel, just some of those bits. I like to have a little bit in there, but I don't want them to be fully loaded with it. There we go. And then we'll see if we can scrape off just a little bit. Otherwise, a lot of times they'll turn your scrambled eggs black. Now, if you're doing fried eggs, you could leave them in there. That won't mess up. But my little Teddy is in love with scrambled eggs, and he gets really upset when I make him a fried egg. He always tells me, he said, put it back in the pan and scramble it for me. And I was like, they taste the same. You'll be fine. Okay, ooh, these are done. Look at that nice golden edge. We're running out of room on here. I have to do a little stack over here. Get our next ones. I think I have enough to make that one. Still needed a little bit more time. So we'll put our next one. I think I have enough to make one more fritter. And then we're done here. But once we get our eggs up, even if these last fritters aren't done, we'll plate up for you guys. Okay, let's get our eggs cooking. I have my pan off because it is still very, very hot. So we don't want to necessarily, I don't want to turn it on yet because I don't want it to cook too fast. And we're going to do a scramble here, but instead of like scrambling them in the bowl, I just scramble them in the pan because it's just easier, saves a dish. And this bacon grease in there is going to add a lot of flavor into our scrambled eggs. My kids always say when we go camping, because I always cook the eggs in bacon grease, they're like, these are the best. So I just pop my yolks, and then we just do a little scramble. And then once I've got them all scrambled up, I'm going to turn my pan on to a low because it's already hot. And we'll cook it low. You don't want to cook your eggs too high, or it's going to stick to the bottom of your pan, and they'll get really dry. So we'll do a quick little scramble in here, and this allows you to kind of mix those bacon bits into your eggs. There we go. And then, again, let's whisk a real quick part of we ran out of glaze. A lot of times I just dip half my fritter in here, but we'll make a smidge more. So just a splash of milk. And that way, if you missed it, you'll see it. A squeeze of vanilla. We're doing a quick one. A shake of cinnamon. Do this a quick whisk because we already got some of our ingredients in here.
On the tomatoes. Is that a tomato salad?
It is just fried tomatoes. So we fried them in our bacon grease. So they'll be hot and with a little bit of garlic salt and fresh parsley. So they'll be a savory cooked tomato, but they just pair really well with the bacon and eggs. Think about like you know how you have tomatoes in your omelets? Like a deconstructed omelet. You could throw some cheese in there. Here we go. Let's get this a little bit more. I know I almost thought about doubling my glaze, but I should have. I thought I'd have enough. But these fritters are always so much bigger than you think, and they have so many ridges. So we're going to just mix this up. And again, my glaze is really simple. Vanilla, milk, cinnamon, and powdered sugar. Now you could always omit the cinnamon if you're not keen on it. We do have cinnamon in the batter too, but I think it just adds that extra layer.
You have a question? Can you go over how you made the fritters?
Yes. So for our fritters, we chopped up 3 nectarines. You could also use peaches and dice them up nice and small. Then we mixed our wet ingredients together, which was a half a cup of milk, 2 tablespoons of melted butter, a half a cup of sour cream, and we kind of mixed all of those together. Then we added in a heaping teaspoon of cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and a half a cup of sugar. Mixed all of those in, and then we added, and there was 1 egg in there as well. Forgot to mention that. And then we added in 1.5 cups of flour before we folded in our nectarines. Okay, let's get our eggs scrambling here. And then we're going to be just about ready for breakfast to serve up here.
You have a question? Do you think gluten-free flour could work?
Honestly, this is a recipe where I think gluten-free flour would actually really work well on it because you're not really relying on it to puff up a cake. So I actually think this could work well. Now, not almond flour, but the actual like gluten-free flour blends, I think would work well on this. Because if you think about it, if you can make like a good pancake with your gluten-free flour, that would work for this because the batter is kind of similar to a pancake batter. Okay, let's get those. Let's see about this last. So we'll put them right here. Got it nice. We're running out of spaces. We got to let those cool off for just a second. And then we'll dip them in our glaze. They're really hot. So again, let your fritters cool before you dip them. Otherwise, you're going to burn yourself with hot oil. My salt's over here. I'm going to give a light sprinkle of salt on my scrambled eggs. And then we'll be ready to serve up here. Now, if you love garlic salt like I do, I would put garlic salt in my eggs, but my kids don't like garlic salt in their eggs. But you can see they've got a little brown color to them. That is from the bacon grease and the bacon bits in there. But remember, we kind of poured out half of our bacon grease and we thinned. So you just imagine if we had kept it all in there, how brown my eggs would look. Okay, let's dip our fritter. There we go. Now that they're kind of cooled off. And then I'm going to serve up our breakfast. Wash our hands. I'm going to turn this guy down nice and low. Okay. We'll move over here. Let's grab 2 fritters. We'll grab our first 2 since we'll grab these 2. Okay, so today we made nectarine fritters. So we have a lovely dough filled with butter, milk, sugar, cinnamon, and 3 whole nectarines. We glazed them in a lovely cinnamon glaze. Then we have our scrambled eggs that we scrambled up in our bacon grease. So they're just full of flavors. Of course, we have our pan fried, or I always say my crazy fried bacon, where we scrambled them up nice. And then just something that's a little bit different, but I absolutely love. We have our Campari tomatoes that we fried in our bacon grease and we sprinkled with garlic salt and fresh parsley to kind of round out our whole breakfast. But again, these babies are the star. They're chock full of nectarines. You could also use peaches. They've got that nice cinnamon flavor that just matches well. And then that extra pop of cinnamon in the glaze really brings all those flavors together. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day to show you what we're making and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, all you have to do is go to that page, search for what we cooked for, and watch along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our cooking gadgets and gear in there. I have my HexClad pans in there, my spatulas, cutting boards, all the different things that I use in our kitchen for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.